Back on the Nintendo 64, the Mario franchise had seen it reach heights it never seen before, revolutionizing 3D gaming, amping up the quality of racing, sports, and minigame collections, while also producing another masterful RPG. But at the same time, plans were in the works for a very different style of game within this franchise. While the franchise normally was cheery and bright, a game was being produced that was in contrast to that. In fact, instead of fast and action, it was slow and steady. Instead of happy, it was somber, and bigger being that this would feature the character Luigi in the acclaimed Luigi's Mansion. And so through numerous different concepts, evolution, designs, and features, and a horde of cut content, today on Gaming History, we shall explore the history and beta unused content of Luigi's Mansion. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button too, to further support us and keep creating new videos. Our story begins in 1999, near the end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle. Hideki Kono of Nintendo EAD, known for directing several major games for the company, including the Mario Kart series and Yoshi's Island, had an idea for a new Mario game for this very 64-bit machine. The main idea that was conceptualized was Mario exploring many different rooms for this game, and thus knew they needed a large house for this. Working together with graphic designer Katsuhiko Kano, ideas were being considered for what kind of location this would be. One of these was an apartment complex, another a ninja mansion. While testing the concept, Kono realized the constantly shifting cameras in 3D rooms may cause motion sickness. So one day, an idea clicked in Kono's head of presenting the game like a dollhouse, whereby the camera would stay overhead of the map and move only room to room, almost like you were looking down a dollhouse yourself. And so with a solid direction in mind, Kono quickly decided that this would be a 3-floor dollhouse with a basement, and all that was left was to decide on what kind of interiors it should have. While working on map creation, the team was messing around with the lighting, shadows, and darkness. Soon, with how much it was being used, the dollhouse started to resemble more a stereotypical haunted mansion. Previous Mario games already featured numerous ghost mansions, and seeing as how this was starting to resemble one, it only made sense to make this game just entirely take place within one of those ghost mansions, with a new emphasis on ghosts. As such, suddenly making what would be another cheery Mario game turned into more of a horror game. But this brought a new problem. Mario was much too brave for the setting. This is where the idea of Luigi came in. Being already in many ways seen as the polar opposite to Mario, the idea of making him more a coward in contrast seemed natural to the team. And so came another new direction, a horror mansion full of ghosts that Luigi has to deal with in order to find his now captive brother Mario in a game called Luigi's Mansion. With the setting now officially in a Western style mansion, it was also agreed that it realistically had to resemble one, and thus everything from washrooms on every floor to a large staircase at the entrance were designed, while simultaneously trying to make each room unique to itself with features. But it was to go beyond just a mansion and even include more of its surroundings. While a backyard was successfully designed, there were plans to make more explorable terrain around the mansion, including an underground cavern like an ant colony. This was scrapped as Kono liked it being more of a closed-off space. As this was a ghost mansion, ghosts were being made as the main enemy, but they didn't want to make the game just another chapter in the Mario series, and rather keep it distinct. Initially, they only wanted Mario and Luigi to appear, and made unique ghosts for this game instead of the traditional boos from the Mario series. However, they met in the middle and decided to use some traditional Mario characters more sparingly, including Toad, which initially was also going to have a green form before settling on red, as well as Boo's, and Bowser himself was to make a sort of an appearance. Being as there were ghosts, combat had to be different this time. Taking possible inspiration from series like Ghostbusters, a vacuum cleaner weapon was introduced, originally called the Poltergust 4000. before later on changed to 3,000, whereby it would suck these ghosts up. Being that it was on the Nintendo 64, the animations of the ghosts transforming as they were being sucked up by the vacuum was difficult to produce. Here, the ghosts would go more semi-transparent, while heavily taxing the N64 as it was utilizing two lighting systems to simultaneously do this effect. At the same time, Kono was worried about the size of the N64 cartridge being too little for this game. The game was clearly becoming too much for the N64, but simultaneously, Nintendo was making their next generation console, the Nintendo GameCube. This was a console that could provide the clear power the team needed. Alongside with the game being rather late into the Nintendo 64's life cycle, it was decided that Luigi's Mansion would now be moving to the Nintendo GameCube. At this point on the Nintendo 64, the lighting wasn't something easy to produce. Normally, natural lighting could only be done utilizing the expansion pack, something that was avoided as it was an extra cost on the customers. Usually, games that used the expansion pack as a requirement were games that were once being built for the 64 disk drive, as they required the expansion pack to function. As such, games such as Majora's Mask and Donkey Kong 64 had this natural lighting effect. Meanwhile, Luigi's Mansion was being made with textures properly laid out to give the illusion of lighting and shadows. So when the game was being moved to the Nintendo GameCube, the development team directly made recommendations to increase the horsepower of the GameCube, namely giving it the natural ability to make dynamic lighting. And so with that, the GameCube's GPU was now equipped with the ability to process dynamic lighting, and now the team could rest easy with well-placed lighting instead of texturized optical shadows and lighting in place, even now allowing for Luigi's flashlight to naturally light anything it hits. With that, development restarted on the GameCube, building the mansion with the GameCube's high-end graphical fidelity and a very detailed and somber appearance fitting of a horror mansion, now even allowing for numerous effects, such as dust in this old dirty mansion, whether it be of Luigi just running around or the vacuum ejecting it. Initially, the dust animations were actually fixed, but the developers spent 6 months in developing a system where it would be truly dynamic. In fact, that very problem of sucking up ghosts was now a problem of yesterday, with plenty of processing power to suck a ghost and have it transform into the vacuum. This led to the team to develop a new stretching effect, where the ghosts would stretch while being sucked. To the team, it seemed like they had no worries over hardware limitations now. With that, the team was building Luigi to have a very detailed model so that even close up, he would look good. Modeling each one of his fingers, giving him facial expressions, and even a mouth interior. But jumping to the GameCube didn't just give the team a technical edge to make this game, but one where they could even influence the creation of the controller to suit the game. In order to move and control the Poltergust, a second stick was needed, a problem that the N64 had by only having one analog stick. And so the development team of the GameCube added a second control stick by their request, made moving and aiming the Poltergust a possibility. In contrast, the team was thinking of sticking to just almost exclusively using the sticks to do everything in order to keep the game simple, where they would even have the left analog stick to aim the Poltergust, while the right stick would move Luigi, with the A button being all you use to suck. This inevitably led to the GameCube's development team to produce a larger C stick for the GameCube. However, while playtesting it, the testers complained about how uncomfortable it was to use the C-stick for long periods of time to control Luigi, let alone pressing A to suck next to it. So as a result, they swapped the sticks around while moving A to the right shoulder button. And following that, the next process of development was designing the rooms, and whereby giving it the objective of solving puzzles all around and unlocking more of the mansion by doing this. While the Poltergust was used to suck ghosts, it also had a secondary function now in solving puzzles. Solving puzzles could be as simple as just sucking something in and it works, or sometimes tricking a ghost to get sucked, and sometimes even as complex as utilizing the new ice, water, and fire mechanics of the vacuum, a desire of the team to make these work realistically. This would be initially done by Luigi finding special nozzles for the vacuum, such as the water nozzle here, and it could be used indefinitely. Something that was eventually limited when they introduced each of the elements via these metals that only enable the vacuum to have these abilities if they find a corresponding element to suck in first. In fact, the vacuum had several features to it. Initially, it had a boxier design with 4 wheels that normally shouldn't be on anyone's back, which eventually was revised to have a rounder, sleeker model, more resembling a backpack even. One feature it had was a pressure meter that went from 0 to 10, where the longer it was used, the more would go up, to the point of where it would max out and burst into flames, which would cause Luigi to flip backwards in pain. There were also plans by Kono to have it get stronger over time like in an RPG, but that mechanic was dropped as he wanted to keep the game straightforward and not be a difficult game at all, as this was, after all, a Mario game. But when it comes to the Poltergust, its ultimate purpose is still, after all, sucking up enemies, and numerous different ghosts were made of different shapes and sizes, both normal enemies and bosses. And at this time, they had several different designs for these ghosts, at first all being shaded blue and with noses at that, complete with sprawling personalities. Not only was Luigi more expressive, but so was everything else to complement him, while these very silly foes were objects by which Luigi was to capture with his new Poltergust vacuum. And as development went forward, the mansion was coming together, gameplay functioning properly, and a setting that would truly make it stand out. And with that, many more experiments were taking place, whereby director Kono had even set up his GameCube development kit to have a stereoscopic 3D monitor, a feature that was way ahead of its time and would allow for one to play a game in glasses-free stereoscopic 3D. While he implemented such a feature, it was something that was soon dropped when he saw that the game's textures and resolutions weren't so flattering for it, let alone requiring one to have a glasses-free stereoscopic 3D TV in the early 2000s. But soon the game was finally ready to be shown off together with the GameCube at the Spaceworld 2000 event. August 2000 came, and so did Spaceworld, a Nintendo event whereby for the first time they would show off the Nintendo GameCube. That, along with a number of games and ideas being shown off too, whether it be Metroid Prime, a controversial Zelda tech demo, and most importantly, Luigi's Mansion. Showing off the haunted mansion full of mysterious blue ghosts, and entering that mansion was none other than Luigi, who was quickly spooked by the first ghost he sees, followed by many ventures of conflicts with many other varieties of blue ghosts. In fact, on stage, producer of this game, the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto, had a small demonstration of the GameCube controller, whereby to show the controller's features, they used one of those blue ghosts as a test demo to show how you can manipulate it with the controller. At the time, publications like IGN, while they were impressed with it being in real time, weren't even sure if this was even a real game or just a tech demo. In fact, they thought it could be part of a bigger Mario game. Meanwhile, others such as the Nintendo World Report just plain were excited over the idea of Luigi getting his own game, and so many left Spaceworld 2000 hyped for this fresh new take on Luigi in this haunted mansion. Being now in September 2000, the game had roughly a year left to make its Japanese release. Plenty of time on paper, but much development was left to be made on this unique game. And with hype aboard, the team trekked on to keep building upon the positive reactions received. And during this phase, continued on from where they left off with the Spaceworld 2000 trailer, the solid blue colored ghosts with different shapes and appearances had a radical change in design, of which two became the basis for two new ghost species, one being the purple puncher, the other being the blue twirler, which didn't resemble those colors yet, as they were blue, but shortly after, they would change to be yellow and pink, before becoming their proper purple and blue colors. The original trailer also did have the ghosts with noses, which included these two. For a bit there, they still were gonna keep their noses on the final versions too, but even those were removed, and more ghost species were being built. Another were the ghost guys. While they come in different colors, they never had blue and cyan forms, but initially were planned to have that, including a sort of face behind that mask too. And during this phase as well, ghosts called the Shining Ghosts were being made that came in 3 colors. Their functionality was to have them bouncing around in the nursery, but eventually they settled on a yellow variant that would rain down in the observatory that you would vacuum up and shoot at the moon. In fact, gold ghosts themselves also received changes, as they were originally white before becoming their more golden color. However, some ghosts were removed entirely. One of them was the ghost chef that can be seen in this screenshot of the kitchen and was to hold a tomato, which he likely would have bowled at Luigi based on the rotation. In fact, it's believed that the yellow bowling ghost is what replaced it, as the bowling ball had a similar functionality to the tomato, surprisingly. Now, a very strange and cut enemy is simply labeled as L. L would stand in stark contrast to anything they were making, as this was basically a literal twisted monster, complete with animations but no textures, as well as came with elemental attacks too, which would have made for an even more unique enemy compared to anything else. It could be theorized that this was in fact an early take on the enemy boss ghost Bogmire, considering its shape, which that in itself also had an early version too called Shadow, and a bigger mouth too. And on a smaller note, mice come in yellow, purple, and cyan colors, but at one point they also had a pink form plan too. Meanwhile, these very ghosts were going to give Luigi, who was given the personality of a coward, an especially huge scare, as when they were to pop right behind him, he'd fall down, crawling backwards automatically while losing half his max HP, something that was changed to just be a startle later, though some theorize that this might have been a feature exclusive to just this ghost here, which looks to have been the original white gold ghost. Whether this was its original functionality, or this was just an entirely different but similar looking ghost, isn't known as of now. And while they were building these enemies, test maps were being utilized for how well they would function before they bring them into the proper mansion, limited to not just enemies, but any objects here too. And with nearly a year's development of building up since the August Spaceworld 2000 trailer, E3 2001 on May 17th to the 19th came, and the fruits of labor were about to be shown. While Spaceworld did reveal the Nintendo GameCube, this was the event to actually show it in full playability, showing actual playable demos of games including Super Smash Bros., Pikmin, and at long last, Luigi's Mansion. While the crowd loved the trailer at the trade show, the demo was what drew most in. Within the demo, it let one explore a chunk of the mansion, whereby many features weren't finalized yet, including the poltergust overheating, as well as that ghost that would definitely scare Luigi. Interestingly, the old control scheme of C-stick controlling Luigi while the left stick controlling the poltergust were there, which in this version was the first appearance of Professor Egad to the public, who in this version was actually the owner of this very mansion before changing the story to Luigi simply winning this mansion at random, which as such didn't have his lab outside, as seen in this very opening video. The mansion in this build was described as an old famous mansion actually, whereas later on it was simply changed as being an apparition itself. One feature that was shown to the public was the Game Boy Horror, a communication device that Professor Egad would use to instruct Luigi, let alone its ability to let one view the map and the inventory and see the mansion in first person. What was interesting about this version of the Game Boy Horror was that it had a real timer on it, counting from midnight to 1:30 a.m., whereby at 1:30, the demo would come to an abrupt end. And as such, rumors started floating around at the trade show that the timer was an indication that the complete game even ran on, whereby one might even only have a specified amount of time to save Mario, which if he didn't, could lead to a bad ending. Which some theorize this shot of Luigi looking extra depressed outside the mansion may be a result of that. While all these were just theories, the more likely scenario might be that they simply wanted to give people a time limit as to not hog the machine all day on the show floor. Meanwhile, borrowing another trait from Ghostbusters, the Game Boy Horror was going to have a ghost tracker, where a little light on the top of it would flicker red near a ghost. In fact, within the Game Boy Horror of this demo, maps of the entire mansion did exist that once data mined showed several differences with what was to come. For one, on the first floor, the butler's room and the hidden room are connected to one another via a door, meaning it wasn't so hidden originally. Just north of that, the kitchen and laundry door were connected via a door as well in this case. Meanwhile, the dining room was to originally have 3 additional doors that would have connected it to the hallway, billiards, and projector rooms, making for a massive hub zone there. as well as the door to the conservatory being accessible from across the washroom. Meanwhile, the foyer's second floor was to have a third door that would lead into that hallway on the right before being removed, as well as an additional door that would lead into the wardrobe room from the washroom. Now, the oddity of the third floor is that every room is connected to one another via a door. It can be theorized that they weren't so sure what pathway they want to lay out just yet, so they kept it simple at that time. This along with one removed room that can be seen to the left of the large balcony area in the back. Meanwhile, the basement level had a smaller secret altar, which in retrospect makes sense since it just featured a portrait of Mario, but as well as the breaker room being accessible via this hallway instead. As well, Professor Egad's lab had a map too, showing how the lab was seamlessly connected via doors, a feature that showed that Luigi could at one point freely explore the lab, whereas soon that feature was removed. All of these being utilized with this doll of Luigi to possibly show where he is on the map at that time. And so people came out of the trade show hotly anticipating the game with an official release date of November 2001 in North America. And so development continued in refining and finishing the game on time. As a result, the mansion was being refined from what was seen at E3 2001. The build, for one, showed the master bedroom being a room that initially had 2 beds and blocked the window that you are required to flip in order to suck Lydia the ghost up. The child's room was just a simple room with ghosts, before the boss battle was added in. The bathroom, like in the final game, had a silhouette of what appears to be a rather curvy woman, which the audience had a good laugh at seeing it on stage at E3, but in the E3 2001 build, when Luigi pulled back, nothing was there. Eventually, a ghost was added. The dining room originally didn't have a portrait ghost here. Instead, it was just a collection of ghosts. As well, the shelf at the corner of the room wasn't there. And moving to Egad's lab, the gallery started out with rather different textures, including these stone and wooden textures, together with many lanterns, giving a more cruder underground appearance. Let alone there appears to be what might be coffins here, a rather dark theme even for this game. This being followed by an updated version that has a similar layout to the previous, but the textures were updated to be closer to the final games. Meanwhile, a completely dark version also was made for this, which had more concrete walls and instead of coffins, had unicorns, before coming to the final version that now sported the human statues. In relation to that, the Portificationizer room initially had a version whereby one could walk into it as indicated by this bump on the map, as opposed to being simply warped there like in the final game, resembling the map from the E3 version of the Game Boy Horror, which this version even included a door to the gallery unlike the final game. And many of the mansion's objects were being designed and refined throughout the stage. Doors originally had a very rough looking design, which some may presume that it could be a carryover from the Nintendo 64 days. In fact, a few more doors were cut, including a heart door, which would lead into the nursery, a star door leading into the twins' rooms, and even a lab door for the gallery room. These, along with a ton of cut furniture that would be fitting for this Western-style mansion, including this gold table for the mirror room, this love seat for the billiard room, a gramophone, which might have worked together with the projector in the projector room, bathroom drawers, which may have been cut due to clutter, 2 different vases, including 3 vases on a chair, 2 probably dying plants for the balcony, a ladder, a flower painting, a strange ice lantern for the cold storage, as well as toys for the nursery, including a teddy bear, toy tractor, and even the ceiling mobile bats. Meanwhile, several animations were being finalized, leading to many also not being used at all. Luigi himself has a very large number of unused animations, whether it be rolls, crouches, and very scared animations. Lydia the Ghost has an unused animation where she turns around, this being a leftover from E3 2001, where to capture Lydia, she must turn around like this. The next portrait ghost would be Uncle Grimly, who has a cut sneaking animation. Now, when it comes to more generic ghosts, animations of theirs were unused simply because mechanics changed, including a spawning animation, being blown away, as in escaping the vacuum's pull, a simple floating animation, which isn't seen as it is used when invisible, a scared animation, which likely was for the now cut concept of Luigi being scared and rushing backwards, and one where they fail to scare Luigi. In addition, the twirler has 3 unused animations exclusive to it, including a wind-up punch, an upwards punch, and one where it ground pounds, showing how much more aggressive they were planning to make this ghost. The bowling ghost has 2 unused animations too, one being of trying to capture it, which isn't used as it has no HP, and a chase animation, as it never moves. Ceiling ghosts also have a similar case of unused animations, whereby it has a cut capture animation, but is also not used since it has no HP, as well as a failure to scare animation as well, along with having an idle animation, but it never goes used since it just hangs around to scare Luigi. Weirder is that it has an animation where it vanishes upwards, which is strange since it hangs upside down normally. Maybe this is how it would disappear originally? There is also the garbage can ghost, who has one idle animation to it, which goes unused as it only appears to eat a banana and toss it. The Boo family seem to have their own set of cut animations, including a spawning animation for regular Boos, as well as a laughing animation, which is only used by King Boo. Boo Losses also has the same unused animations, except 3 others too, that are normally used only by the regular Boos, which includes a following animation and a hiding animation, as well as King Boo having a single unused hiding animation. All this may indicate that the Boo family likely had their animations all made from a regular Boo and just passed on to various versions seen in the game. Now, one of the most defining features of Luigi's Mansion is its music. Contrasting heavily with Mario's soundtrack, it was made eerie, spooky, and dark in comparison. Perfect for the Haunted Mansion's theme. The music was being composed by Kazumi Totaka. Totaka has been a long-time composer at Nintendo, making music for various Mario games as well as Animal Crossing on the Nintendo 64 in Japan, and as such is most famous for a short melody he puts into every game he works on, known famously as Totaka's Song, which first appeared in Mario Paint. And various other titles to follow. A very simple and short song, but whenever it composes, it finds its way deep into the game. This was going to be no different with Luigi's Mansion, which would have been heard during the control screen tutorial early in the game if left on it inactive for 3.5 minutes. However, Totaka's song differed between Japanese and English releases. Have a listen. Meanwhile, several other songs were being composed but never used, including early versions of the main theme, one for the observatory, one oddly enough being the Mario fanfare that was going to be used with the Boo Losses boss fight somehow, as well as 2 early versions of the Mario theme heard in the conservatory. And an early version of the Room Clear jingle. In addition, were several sound effects and dialogue that got cut. One of these being more lines for Luigi.
Whoa! Hang on to Mario. Oh, nice doggy, nice doggy. Oh, pat, pat.
Might have been simply for the intro to the Ghost Dog, along with several others. While to the masses the game looked to be going well, behind the scene, however, it was becoming a madhouse. With the launch date coming quickly, there soon were arguments between designers and programmers on the ideas of having to cut content out and what to keep. In fact, it was to the point of more ideas being suggested than removed. Even producer Shigeru Miyamoto got in on it and suggested the ability to turn off the flashlight, which of course being a command from Miyamoto, that got in. This along with one more suggestion of Luigi tapping the wall immediately, instead of going into a log animation that they originally had planned for him. In fact, many of the mechanics were finalized now too, including the overheat meter for the poltergust being removed, allowing for unlimited sucking. However, that meter was soon repurposed for the elemental attacks, which up to this point were unlimited in usage. Meanwhile, features like the ghost tracker were being modified to only detect boos, as it likely would be tough to distinguish between them and normal ghosts. Other ideas that were being added this late in development were Luigi's idle whistling and humming, and the ability to call Mario's name at any point. The humming was implemented as a further showcase of Luigi's urgency to find Mario, but as well a secondary reason of the staff not finding Totaka's tracks interesting enough and wanting to allow for this to come up at times. However, the humming was made to change in tempo depending on Luigi's health. Whereby it would slow down if he is on the verge of death, or play at a normal rate while he is healthy. This was a feature that was made possible not by playing a pre-recorded track, but rather using the console's sound functionality to produce and manipulate it. Some features, including Luigi being poisoned, were removed, where he would have lost health continuously. In fact, some graphics of Luigi exist that were meant for the endings depending on your results. One featuring Luigi being extremely happy with getting the best ending, another kinda happy with a more moderate ending, while one where he is super depressed, much as the Spaceworld 2000 trailer Luigi, possibly the worst ending, utilizing a tent, which is very fitting of this expression. But while all those were small cuts, a major element of this game had to be cut: the multiplayer mode. While making the game, a co-op mode was in development, whereby alongside Luigi, you'd have Mario with his own poltergust vacuum on board. Strangely enough, the Mario used here for this version is taller than the Mario seen in game, possibly done as to not change his collision too much with Luigi's. In fact, the co-op mode stayed into the data of the final game, whereby if hacked and you add an additional playable character on screen, they both are functional and can suck the same ghost at the same time, and the screen will even split if they go too far away from each other. So yes, a playable Mario was being made here for co-op multiplayer, which would be odd as this would contradict the existing story, as Mario should be kidnapped. Perhaps another character being kidnapped instead? Or this was just a mode that was made more for fun than for story. And shortly after came Spaceworld once more in late August 2001, a few weeks prior to launch in Japan, and its final appearance too at the trade show. The game was basically finalized here. No more overheat meter, and the clock function of the Game Boy Horror were gone. Despite that, a few minor differences stayed, such as camera angles, like the mansion scene from outside. After much anticipation for this launch game on the Nintendo GameCube, Luigi's Mansion released on September 14, 2001 Japan, and November 18, 2001 in North America. The game had decent reviews, ranging between 7 and 9 scores mainly. While reviewers such as GameSpy loved its graphics, design, and gameplay, its continuous problem was that of being compared to Mario. GameSpot in this case stating how it does not match up to Mario's previous adventures, while ones like All Games criticizing the game's length for being too short. But commercially, it was a great success, having the tough feat of carrying the GameCube's launch till the release of Super Smash Bros. Melee, which in itself wasn't an easy feat, but it still managed to sell 257,000 units in just its first week in North America, even outselling the amount of copies that Super Mario 64 sold in its opening weekend. Thus, it soon became among the first GameCube games to get a Player's Choice re-release, reserved for games that sold at least 1 million at the time. While the game sold well and had somewhat mixed reception, it created a massive legacy for Luigi and this game. At long last, Luigi was more than just being a green Mario, featuring a distinct personality, playstyle, and even genre, leading to the game to receive several cameos and appearances within other games too, including Super Smash Bros., the Mario Kart series, and even Nintendo Land. And eventually, a remake of this game for the 3DS came in 2018, whereby it not only remade the whole game, but brought in several features of not just its sequel, but also its cut content, including the cut co-op multiplayer mode, whereby the second player would now control a Luigi made of goo called Gooigi. And finally, utilizing the unused stereoscopic 3D here, using the 3DS's built-in 3D functionality. And eventually, Luigi's Mansion finally got a sequel on the 3DS called Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, and a third game on the Switch. Instead of being handled by Nintendo EAD, the game went on to being notably developed by Canadian-based Next Level Games, and continuing the game spirit for the future. And thank you for watching! Hit the subscribe button for I'll plan to be back for more Luigi and other games gaming history and cut content soon. Hit the like button and comment below on which cut feature you would have loved to have stayed into the final game. So everyone, thank you for watching!